Welcome back, everybody. We're here for episode 12 of the Mariners Deep Dive podcast, where we are going to be recapping the Mariners and Twins series and then previewing the Mariners and White Sox series. Mariners enter their second series of the season at 2-2 on the early going, and they won their first two, lost their second two in kind of reminiscent fashion of last year, where they won a lot of close one-run games, had the best record in one-run games, but also had a negative run differential because when they lost, they tend to get blown out because of lack of offense. And so far in the first four games, our two wins were in one-run games, and our two losses were in blowout fashion, and the other one in close to blowout fashion. We'll dive into some quick transactions, some news on the waiver or on the free agent market and whatnot for the Mariners. So we'll start off. Mariners signed a couple of depth minor league contracts for a couple of relievers. Daniel Ponce de Leon, former Cardinals pitcher, right-hander, and Nick Ramirez, who's a former Padres reliever who's left-handed. Both were not good last year statistics-wise, and both are right around 30 years old. And will probably be in AAA to start the season and be like depth reliever arms, potentially, who could maybe get called up to the MLB at some point this season, but on minor league contracts, it really doesn't affect the cap. So they bring in some extra depth just because. And the big news is JP Crawford signs a 5-year, $51 million contract extension, which is right around $10.2 million per season. It could be front or back loaded. I don't have those details right now, but technically, if you did the math and divided 51 by 5, it'd be 10.2. So that's right around where it is for an elite defensive shortstop who is a pretty consistent contact hitter, elite defensive shortstop, and still very young, kind of a locker room glue guy, great team leader too, and a guy that fans really like to watch on and off the field. So kind of a cool signing to keep him around. And he's been one of the Mariners' more consistent contributors so far this season and last season. So good on them for getting that deal done with JP Crawford. So he will be sticking around. Of course, I'm wearing that jersey right now. So Jake, a couple of minor league deals, and JP Crawford, a quick reaction from you on these moves.
JP Crawford, having him around for a long time is going to be great for us. As you can see, he's one of our most consistent hitters. He gets on base, he hits singles, and he plays really good defense. And somehow, just looking at the internet, a lot of people say that he's a terrible player, which doesn't make sense. They say, oh, look at his advanced defensive stats, like what's that stat, OAA or something. But if you look at stats like runs saved, he was what, second last year in the MLB. And he makes a lot of plays, that a lot of people don't. A lot of good defenders, are good defenders because they make the plays, the easy plays, but hard plays they just can't make, and so it doesn't count as errors or anything. And so JP Crawford makes a lot more plays than expected. And hitting wise, he's hitting up near 300 right now. I think he's hitting 333.
JP right now only has 8 official at bats because he's walked a little bit, but he's 3 for 8 so far, which is the 375 average, and he also in the early going, he only has 8 at bats, but that's because he's been getting on base a lot. So right now it's 375 batting average, but a 545 on base percentage. So that's a 1.05 OPS. And so far through 4 games, that's a 205 OPS plus.
Yeah, and on defense, he's above average when it comes to fielding percentage.
He literally saved a run in today's game, which we'll get to, but they had the infield in and they had runners on second and third with nobody out. They have the infield in, Carlos Correa at the plate. He hits a ground ball too short. He throws it home and throws out the runner. So he literally saved a run in today's game. He's still very good
Yeah,
defensively. And he was
I
also a
will
gold glover
say,
2 years ago. And he was in the running for gold glove last year. So the
I,
MLB voters recognize his defense.
I will say, that play today was really nice. However, it was fairly routine for that kind of play, but of course he executed it to perfection.
Throw was on the
As
money, though.
for stats like range factor, which kind of puts your put outs and assists, which is a put out is like you catch the ball on a base or you tag someone out, and then the assist is throwing the ball to a another player who gets an out or like a double play. You throw it to the
Yeah.
second baseman and then whatever. He's above average in both of those in that stat as well. Um, I wish I could see this stupid OAA fact, but he's top 10 in defensive war twice. He's he's top 10 in a lot of categories. Um like let's see. Games played, plate appearances, doubles, walks. He was or he's actually second in walks right now. Sorry. Outs made, games at shortstop. He's been in that category a lot. He's consistent. Assists, range factor, fielding percentage, double plays, turn, put outs, assists. Yeah, fielding percentage, all the good stats. So, he looks like a great defender statistically to me, and you can see it in the eye test, of course. And he is definitely a cornerstone of this team. Him and Ty France need to be locked up for a while because those two are going to be really good for a long time on both sides of the ball.
Yes.
As for that, the relievers we signed, hopefully we can find another left-handed reliever who's good because Misevich looked bad today, and we have Justice Sheffield, and that's it. And I don't know what our plan for Sheffield is because you would think he would get inning work in a game like the third game of the series where they just needed someone to eat up some innings. But yeah, we have no lefty bullpen threats right now.
Yeah, it's definitely a problem that we don't have any lefties. I mean, maybe Nick Ramirez, who we just signed, gets a crack at the bullpen, but not totally sure. He could potentially replace Matt Festa, but we're going to get to that in 1 second. So those are like the main moves that the Mariners have made. So we'll get into the series now. Quick game by game, just the results to start. So looking at it, so we start off 1-0, 2-1 or 2-1 victory. We had the early home run by Mitch Haniger in his first at bat of the season. We're up 2-0. Then later in the game, it was a solo shot by Gio Urshela. Robbie Ray was very good in his first start, going 7 innings and throwing 96 pitches. His whip is at 1. His ERA is at 1.29 through that first start. So despite having 4 walks, he only gave up 3 hits. The only concern was he only had 5 strikeouts, but you know what? He was controlling runners and he was being efficient with his pitch count. So we can get past that and he will improve as the season goes on in that category. And then classic Sewald Steckenrider, back-to-back, close out the game situation. Steckenrider, a little bit scary, there was 1 base runner on and Gary Sanchez came up when the Twins were down to their final out and hit a fly ball to the warning track where Winker did a little frog hop up against the wall and made the catch. Thought that might have been a walk-off home run, but stays in the yard and the Mariners get their first win. I was a little aggravated at that game because our offense had a lot of opportunities to drive in runs, but we did get the win despite the lack of offense, and Robbie Ray and the bullpen looked good. So that was nice, at least. Second game, we win 4-3. This game we were trailing at first, and then we were able to get 1 run. Then Tom Murphy gave us the lead with his home run in the 1 game that he's played so far this year. We'll talk about the catcher situation. Byron Buxton then hit a home run that gave them the lead back. And then that led to the 9th inning where the Mariners had a comeback. It was a Julio Rodriguez on his first major league hit. It was a double, and JP Crawford moves him over. Tom Murphy strikes out, unfortunately, but Adam Frazier got his first hit, got a double, drive him in, and then France with a single gave us the lead before we closed it down with Diego Castillo. So another close 1-run win. The thing that was most concerning to me in that game was, again, a lot of base runners left on base by the Mariners, lack of taking advantage of runners, and also Logan Gilbert struggled at first in the first two innings, but then he got it together and ended up having a nice 5-inning performance, only giving up the 1 run. And then Tom Murphy making a big mistake where we could have had the bases loaded with 1 out, but instead it was men on the corners with 2 outs because there was a sinking blooper into right field where he froze in between first and second, didn't want to get doubled off at first, but as the ball was about to hit the ground, instead of taking 2 steps forward, he takes 2 steps back, gets caught flat-footed going back to first, and gets gunned out at second, which took away a hit from the team and also set us up in a much worse situation that prevented a potential sacrifice run. So that was not good to see. And then he also struck out in the top of the 9th when we had a chance to tie the game. We ended up tying the game and winning, but he struck out with a runner on third and 1 out. So that was also not good for Murphy. Then we lose 4-10 in what was an abysmal performance from Marco Gonzalez and a bad performance from the offense other than Mitch Haniger with a 3-run home run in that game. And then today, the Mariners lost 4-0, only had 2 hits on the entire game. We had a few walks here and there, but overall, it was not good. We got shut down by Dylan Bundy, who was very bad last year and got moved out of the Angels rotation with an over 6 ERA to the bullpen. And as for pitching, Chris Flexen gives up 3 earned runs. Misevich gave up 3 hits and an earned run. The rest of the bullpen guys pitched well, but it was already too late and we got no hope from the offense. So that's basically how it's gone. 2-2 now. That series against the Twins, they have a nice offense. Byron Buxton got going and they hit a lot of home runs. They had 6 total home runs in that game that we gave up 10 runs. So yeah, that's basically the recap of those games. We'll jump into some statistics and things to keep track of. So Jake, I'm going to pass it to you to start us off talking about what you think's going on. But I already know from talking to you before the episode that a lot of it will focus on consistency. And of course, we have to talk about this offense before it gets out of hand.
So I brought both of these issues up in our last episode. Go check that out, where we predict the Mariners season. We talk about their weaknesses at the end. And my 2 weaknesses were hitting, like for contact and average, and starting pitching consistency. And you might say, oh, Flexen and Marco look decent. You know, they weren't giving up a ton of runs, even though Flexen technically gave up 3 runs.
3, yeah. 3 earned runs.
3, because he left 2 guys on base. And then Misevich gave up the runs. But of course, those runs go to Flexen. The only consistent pitcher we had was Robbie Ray. And even he wasn't really consistent in his own right, as in he wasn't doing the things he normally does, which is, you know, strike guys out. But he was good. Then Logan Gilbert was not consistent at all. Just putting guys on base, walking guys, giving up hits. I'm just kind of struggling to be, you know, consistent. Struggled his way through a 1-run appearance. Marco, I don't even need to talk about that. And Flexen looked similar to Gilbert, where he just kind of kept walking guys, giving up hits, letting guys on base, putting the team in bad situations. And I mean, I believe Flexen got saved twice I think we threw two guys out at home plate. I think Miguel Sano was
Yeah.
another.
They had a runner at first, and there was a double off the wall where a defensive relay got Sano at home plate because of how slow Sano is. Otherwise, it would have been another run, and also the second and third situation where we had the infield in and Correa hit a ground ball right to short, and Crawford threw it home as the runner was going home and got him at home plate. So if you add those two, then it would be 5 earned runs, would have been a 6-0 game.
So yeah, those are our issues, and one of our issues is pitching consistency. And you see inconsistencies from 3 of the 4 guys who pitched, and you could say 4 because Robbie Ray, wasn't Robbie Ray. He looked more like Marco Gonzalez with pitching. Just people are making contact, but the defense is making plays. So like, we'll see what I have no expectations for Matt Brash's consistency and what he's going to be in MLB. But we've seen Gilbert, we've seen Marco, we've seen Ray, and we've seen Flexen, and they just all looked off, like it was an off night. And then you go to this other side and you look at the team issues on offense, and you look at how much they struggle to make contact with the ball. And last year, somehow we made contact with people in running or people in scoring position, which was weird because we never made contact otherwise. And we would drive in runs when needed, but it was just no one was ever there. And now it's like no one's there. And even if they do get there, they don't get in. And so like, I don't know if you felt the same way, but it felt like every time I watched us hit, it was either a strikeout, a pop-up, a weak ground ball, or the only time we made good contact was like a fly out to center field, which is the death sentence in Minnesota because it's a deep outfield. And they have this guy by the name of Byron Buxton running around there, who's probably the fastest good player in the league. Sorry, Tim Castro, but he makes insane amount of ground up, so you're not going to get hits hitting towards him. So like,
right,
it just feels like this team can't put a ball where you need to put it to get a hit. And the only time you can really get a hit is if you hit a homer, or if you're Ty France and you just hit it off the wall. Or, the only other hits we had were dinky bloopers right in front of the outfielders. But we had no like real solid hits, it felt like.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
we need to focus on getting good solid contact on balls, hitting ground balls in the gaps in the infield, hitting fly balls in the gaps in the outfield, or just hitting in them over the heads of people. But it just feels like they're going out and flailing their bats around and not making contact or good contact at all.
Yeah, when you're looking at the offense, I mean, right now the Mariners are 24th in on base. We have the 3rd worst team average at 177. It's been pretty brutal. Obviously just the 2 hits today, and 2 of our 3 home runs have come from Haniger. 1 was from Murphy in the 1 game that he's played. We're kind of doing a switcheroo thing at catcher. We went Raleigh, Murphy, Torrens, and then we started Raleigh today before he got pinch hit for, and then Murphy came in as a defensive sub. But it's like, so what we're going to play, we're going to have 3 catchers on the roster just so that we can maybe try and figure out which one's the best by playing them every couple of days. Like, I don't like that at all. I mean, it makes a lot of sense that when Torrens catches, we have our worst pitching performance so far this season because he's not a good defensive catcher.
I did notice in my head, so the other day I rewatched this video about Jeff Mathis um, from Foolish Baseball and how he makes pitchers better just because he's such a good catcher. And I was sitting there and I'm like, wow, Marco's looking terrible. What's going on? Who's behind the plate? Oh, wait, it's Luis Torrens,
Yeah.
who's statistically, like last year, he was the worst catcher in the MLB.
Yeah.
Like, come on, bro, you're worse than Gary Sanchez. They've got Gary Sanchez on the other side of the plate. Come on. But,
Yeah, no, you're definitely right. I mean, Torrens being behind the plate is not like, he's a decent bat when he is hot, which he's streaky. So I wouldn't even call him like a good bat. But the problem is it's like we have lots of extra guys to rotate around to try and have as a DH. And we're trying to rotate a lot of guys around, especially with Kellenic really struggling early on, Julio struggling, Toro and Suarez have really struggled offensively so far. I mean, Suarez at least had like the double today, so that was good to see. But overall, he's really not been good, striking out a lot, and his defense is it's fine. And today, and Frazier has struggled a little bit, but switching a lot of guys in out of DH, and then we're trying to get Torrens in there, so you put him a catcher, like it's not a good move. I just don't think that you can afford to put him out there as a catcher. And if you can't put him in as a DH, if you don't feel comfortable putting him as a DH because you feel like all your other options at DH with when Kyle Lewis comes back will be even more so, and you feel like you need to put him at catcher to get him at bats, then you need to get rid of him because he cannot catch. Like, you cannot put him behind the plate. It is not worth it. Not only is he bad defensively, guys will steal all day. Guys will test for home all day. His defense will hurt the defense as a whole and the communication as a whole, and he will make the pitcher's performance worse. Like, it is almost guaranteed, because where he calls pitches to be, where he frames pitches, he does not help the pitcher with the umpire because he's not a good framer. He's
the pitches he calls,
he's not good at blocking pitches. He's not really good at anything defensively. He definitely doesn't have a good arm behind the plate. So it's going to be free reign for base runners. I mean, he can't be behind the plate. It's plain and simple. So if we have to get rid of him because we can't put him at DH, it's too crowded, then so be it. But you cannot put him in catcher.
Here's my suggestion for Torrens is convert him into a first baseman, because he can be a backup first baseman who DHs. You put him in at first when Ty France needs a break, and you put him in at DH whenever, or you put Ty France at DH, whatever, however Service wants to do it, because he has this habit of putting good defensive players at DH and leaving Jesse Winker in the outfield. So, yeah, but defense doesn't matter that much at first base. And so he'd be, if you can convert him there, he'd be, like an average first baseman. But I'm having issues with Cal Raleigh because it feels like he can't hit. Like, he just can't. It's watching him hit makes me want to stab my eyeballs with forks. Like, I'm watching him hit in the first game of the year, and every single pitch he was out in front leaning, and he just looked like he was on his front foot just getting fooled. And the only hit he got, he was so out in front of it that hit the very end of his bat and rolled down the third base line for a hit. So, like,
Yeah,
he can't hit. People talk about how powerful he is. I haven't seen it. He hit 2 home runs. And then defensively, it doesn't feel that good.
Yeah, I think Raleigh,
he had a play today where he gave up a catcher's interference in an at-bat where it was Romo, and Romo was up 2-2 on the count. He was about to strike the guy out. I think it was Kepler, and catcher's interference, and he almost destroys Romo's inning. Like, that can't happen.
yeah. I think Raleigh, He's very young and he hits really well at AAA and he shows off a lot of power at AAA. His defense, he has some qualities. I think in the first game of the season, he did a nice job blocking some pitches and did some things nicely, but the catching position for the Mariners in general, I think there's a reason we drafted Harry Ford last year. Like we drafted 3 catchers in the draft in total. Our catching situation is not good. And Raleigh, I think the reason we keep trying to put him out there is because he's at least a little bit better defensively than Terrence. Like he's not totally incompetent behind the plate. And we want to believe, kind of like with Taylor Trammell, like his hitting in AAA will eventually convert to the big league. So being a young guy, we keep giving him opportunities, but it's just not working. And as much as I hate on Tom Murphy, he's the most consistent defensive catcher we have. He's not great, but he's not bad. And he at least has some pop. Like he'll hit some home runs, like he showed that opposite field power. And he's not the most incompetent bat of all time. Like Cal Raleigh just looks confused at the plate, and Terrence just looks confused defensively, and both of them are not like elite on the other side of the ball. So it doesn't work.
I do think Tom Murphy has a much better time behind the plate. I feel like
Yeah, no, definitely. Pitchers are definitely way more comfortable with him behind the plate too.
I feel like now that I think about it, I feel like Robbie Ray and Chris Flexen might have played better if they had Tom Murphy behind the plate.
Yeah.
Tom Murphy, like strikeouts are a huge part of the catcher too, because the catcher has to call for the right pitch in a strikeout situation. They have to know what the pitcher wants to do there. They have to know where to throw the ball. They have to know where to lead the pitcher.
Yeah.
Pitchers don't just throw the ball wherever they want. They throw the ball to the catcher's glove. So like, if you want a ball up and in, catcher's going to put his glove up and in.
Yeah.
If you want it down and away, catcher's going to put his glove down and away. That's the target. If the catcher sets up, the catcher sets up in the wrong spot, it's likely the pitcher's not going to hit a spot. And, when there's miscommunication, like they agree on the spot where the ball is going to be. And when there's miscommunication, that's when you see catchers like make crazy plays to try and stop the ball. But I feel like Tom Murphy has a better understanding of what to do with pitchers and how to understand them. And, Cal Raleigh is still trying to figure out how MLB pitchers act.
Yeah. And statistically at this moment, I couldn't tell you which side he's better from because he hasn't really been great from either side. But why is he switch hitter? Like, why are you having your catcher switch hit? It makes no sense because not only does he have to deal with handling a pitching staff, and not only does he have to deal with runners on base and, all kinds of stuff, all kinds of information being a catcher already, and he's young, still trying to adjust to major league pitching. So why is he focusing on hitting from 2 sides of the plate at the same time? Like his workload is way too big. They were talking about in spring training, he had a big workload last year. That's why he struggled a bit and he could really turn things around this year. Why don't you just have him stop switch hitting so he doesn't have to?
Well,
you look at like Cedric. Cedric Mullins is not a catcher, but the dude dropped switch hitting and went from like a mediocre bottom of the bench guy on the Orioles to one of the best center fielders in the MLB. And he's going to get a fat contract and he's the first 30-30 player in Orioles history. Like he drops the switch hitting and he's just a stud at the plate. And I'm not saying Raleigh will be a stud, but if he drops it for like his more natural side to hit off of, it could seriously benefit him and he'll have way less to have to worry about and work on in practice because switch hitters, it's hard. Like if you're good at it, it's a big advantage. But there's a reason not very many people do it. And it's because they have to practice every single time they hitting from both sides of the plate. Like I've seen kids in youth baseball that I played with that try to switch hit and it just doesn't work because they're not good from one side.
All right. I have a question. Who is the best switch hitter in the MLB
currently?
Yeah.
Ozzie Albies is a good hitter and he's a switch hitter, but his numbers as a right-handed hitter are significantly better than as a lefty. People have been arguing for him to switch back to just being a right-handed hitter.
I'm going to argue Ketel Marte.
Ketel Marte was the next guy I was going to bring up. He is a much better switch hitter. Like I said, it can work for guys. If it works for you, if you
Jose
can make,
Ramirez.
that's one too. If you can make switch hitting work, it is a matchup nightmare for opposing managers, and it's a huge advantage to you. But when you're a catcher and you're really young and you're struggling on both sides of the ball, like at some point you got to simplify the game. You got to slow the game down. And I just feel like he has way too big of a workload right now in front of him
So
being a switch hitter.
here's what I think the Mariners should do at catcher. Forget about hitting. Forget about it.
It's fair enough. I mean, you're sliding the catcher into the 9-hole anyways. You may as well have some consistent defense and help out your pitching.
So I really suggest that people listening to this go check out the foolish baseball bits on Jeff Mathis, because he talks about Jeff Mathis and how, as a guy who literally is the worst hitter of all time, has had a 16-year career, and he's played a long time, and he's the best defensive catcher probably of all time. Like, this dude, he made Lance Lynn on the Rangers a Cy Young Award candidate, and he made someone else on the Rangers a Cy Young candidate in that time who's not very good. But pitchers with him catching, like, I saw statistics about it, and it was like a lot of them were pitching like 2.5 ERAs with him behind the plate, and without him, they were pitching in the 5s.
Yeah.
So if you go get a defensive guy who can really, settle in pitchers, because we need to fix our consistency as starting pitcher. Like I said, you go get a really good defensive catcher, that'll fix that. Like Mike Zunino would fix that. And plus that guy hits bombs when he hits. Yeah. So like,
he at least does something. I mean, he doesn't hit for a high average, but if your 9-hole hitter hits like 190, but hits like 35 home runs a year and makes your pitching significantly better on a nightly basis because of his ability behind the plate, like that is a huge win. Like, you're not, unless the only guys that are like worth big bucks at catcher are like, I mean, like if you're like a great offensive catcher that like a Salvador Perez, who's also really good defensively, you're like one of a kind, like Yadier Molina, what he's done for so long. Like, you just don't find those guys very often. You're usually going to find a bat that like you throw behind the plate, or you're going to find a defender that you throw out like the pitching spot in, like as if it was a pitcher in your lineup in the National League. Like, so I feel like the Mariners, they're definitely not going to find a bat out of their organization right now, a catcher, unless they make some kind of move that I don't see happening. So you may as well just go for defense. But
I mean, I'd rather commit to Tom Murphy right now. Actually, I think we should commit to Tom Murphy.
Yeah, because I mean, he's not Mike Zunino, but at least he has some pop, and he plays consistent enough defense.
And another thing is, a big part of catching and pitching is you have to have consistency between players. So, sorry, not consistency, continuity. So they have to be together for a while. So, the Mariners they assign a catcher to a pitcher, and maybe that takes a load off of Cal Raleigh. But like, in that case, I would give Cal Raleigh like one pitcher.
Yeah.
And just let him his load go away. But Tom Murphy should be spending time with these guys. We should have one catcher spending a lot of time with these guys and building their relationship behind the plate.
Yeah, the worst thing you can do right now is have three catchers in a row. I didn't plan on turning this into a catcher episode, but it's definitely a position that needs to be addressed and has been kind of a big problem for us here in the early series. But the other issues, I mean, Jake mentioned not having pitcher consistency. The one thing I'll say about Ray is it's like, at least he got through it. That's just kind of the veteran in Ray. I expect that to improve. And the thing about Gilbert, he's really young, and I do like. I mean, the thing I noticed is what we've noticed about Gilbert early in his career is he throws a boatload of fastballs, and guys catch on
Too
to that
many.
after the first time through. I was really noticing after the first 2 innings, he started actually incorporating his other pitches. He's throwing the curveball in, throwing the slider more. He dropped the changeup in there once in a while. And I even heard today, they were talking about Logan Gilbert, and they said they were asking Scott Service, like, what did you tell him to turn it around after the second inning? He just said, use your other pitches. It's pretty simple, honestly. He doesn't need those pitches to be dominant. He has a really good fastball, like up mid to high 90s, usually pretty well located most of the time. But in a league where guys rake fastballs and hit home runs, you cannot throw it like 90% of the time. So you mix in those other pitches, catch them off guard, and then you can locate your fastball.
Well, I mean, what's the easiest pitch to hit in the MLB?
Is
A
a fastball.
fastball.
Exactly.
Because
And
you know where
when
it's
you throw
going.
it that many times, like there was one at bat where he had like he double digit pitch at bat, and he had 2 strikes on him, and he threw like 7 fastballs in a row. And on like the 7th one, he finally timed it up and hit it. It's like you throw the same pitch that many times in a row, he's going to time it up. He's a major league hitter. But I do like how he turned things around. Flexen, he's better at home, but man, I'd love to see him turn it around on the road. And I mean, Marco Gonzalez started last year off pretty rough too, so maybe he'll be able to turn it around. And maybe with Torrens not being back there, he'll turn it around too. That's enough for the pitching.
I did notice one thing about Marco,
Yeah,
and that was a lot of his pitches were up and in, and they were just fastball or not fastball, home run, like
correct.
served on a platter. So I have no idea. I have a feeling that has something to do with Torrens and his pitch calling, because he threw curveballs up and in, and he threw sinkers up and in.
Yeah,
Marco Gonzalez is a bottom of the strike zone pitcher.
he's got to be
And
ground
he
ball
did
guy.
not
He
do
has
that.
to be. He has to pitch to contact. He doesn't have strikeout stuff. He doesn't have the velocity. He doesn't have the movement. He's got kind of a floater curveball. He's got a sinker. And when you throw it that soft, you have to keep it down and get ground balls to this good
And
infield.
if you
And
keep
he
it,
just didn't. I mean, every time he threw it up, it was like Buxton tees off. This guy tees off. This guy
Yep.
tees off. Like
If
that
you-
at bat where he gave the grand slam to Sanchez, he just threw it right up and in, and the dude just teed it off.
if you have, you know, if you have the sinker curveball mix like Marco, you have to keep it in the strike zone, and you
Yeah.
have to keep it down, mostly away, but you have to keep it down, because
And you'd rather have
they're
a
just going
walk.
for ground balls.
You'd rather have a walk and set up, have a runner on first, and then continue to pitch down and get a double play, than go up in the zone and give up a tater.
Sinker balls at the bottom of the strike zone are almost impossible to hit for home runs.
Correct.
And so, but once they get up in the zone, they go flying.
Yeah.
Right. So if he keeps them down, he's a ground ball pitcher, but he gave up like an insane amount of fly balls. So he's got to get that together. And whether that's a catching issue, like a communication issue, I'm not sure, but it's got to get changed.
Yeah. The last thing on this series, mentioned a lot of the bats in the lineup. The only one that I really wanted to dive into, I mean, third base, something we got to get figured out, because the combination of Toro and Suarez so far have both struggled tremendously. But the one name other than Julio, because, still very on Julio, pretty much the issue that we've diagnosed is, for some reason, he's being less aggressive with 2 strikes and not swinging, very aggressive when he's in a good count. And pitchers are only throwing in breaking balls. Literally the only thing that he's being thrown is breaking balls, and he has not had a great eye so far. He did take a walk today, and then you see how electric he can be. He steals a base, gets over to third, he makes some plays. He's played pretty solid defense so far, then one miscommunication that didn't end up in an error. So I think he'll be okay. He's still very young. He's only 21. He's figuring things out, and he's going to have to adjust. He's going to have to adjust. I mean, when you're 21 years old and you've only known how to rake in the minor leagues, because pitchers continue to throw fastballs because in the minor leagues, they're trying to get ahead and whatnot. And then you get to the major league level and face major league level breaking balls. You've never even played in AAA. And every single pitch is a breaking pitch, and it's just impossible to time things up and locate pitches and guess what's coming next. It's tough, and it's going to be an adjustment period, but I think he'll be fine because he came up clutch and helped us in that second game of the season. And I think that he, with his abilities defensively, his base running abilities, and I think his offense will catch on. I don't think it's a big
I
issue.
think I think it would be very interesting to see his swing rates, the
Yeah.
pitches that he swings the most at, because it feels like he doesn't swing at curveballs and sliders. It just feels like he doesn't. And it feels like he only swings at fastballs because he's in a 2-strike count and he lets a slider hit the outside of the plate and it's called for a strike because it probably will be. Um, and he's gonna have like 7 strikeouts. Most of them are looking, it feels like,
Yeah.
and he just lets the slider get in, and then he doesn't swing, and then strike 3, and some of them aren't strikes, but you got to be aggressive there. So it feels like he's just got to get more aggressive on those sliders. Hopefully, he's taking these first few games to kind of figure out what they look like in the
Yes.
MLB. He hasn't faced an elite slider yet. He's faced a lot of average pitchers sliders. Um, trying to think of a pitcher with an elite slider or curveball. I can't really do it off the top of my head.
Other than Robbie Ray.
Yeah, if he went up against Robbie Ray, it would be a nightmare for him. But
Yeah, I
yeah,
don't think yeah. But the guy that I really wanted to talk about, I know Rodriguez is off to a tough start, but I think he'll get it turned around. The guy I really want to talk about for just a second here, I don't want to go too long on this, but so Jared Kelenic right now. Last year we know he went on that big long hitless streak and was just atrocious for a long time. Gets sent down, comes back up. He's much better at the end of the season, is actually kind of a contributor, ends up with 14 home runs, kind of turns things around. This year, I mean, so he's off to a 1 for 11 start at the plate. He has 1 hit, like I mentioned. That hit was a pop up that didn't get past the pitcher's mound. And the only reason it dropped for a hit was because at the last second, the pitcher runs out from under it and tries to give it up to Sano, who's coming from a long ways away and can't get to it. So it drops in, and that's his only hit so far. I've seen him in good counts, getting good pitches right down the middle. And I've heard the announcers say, and all them, like good swing there, or that's the right pitch to swing at. That's like right in his wheelhouse, but he's just not on it. Like, I don't know if it's timing or mechanics, or what's going on. He just does not have it right now. And what was a big concern last year, and a lot of people expecting him to turn around this year, but even a lot of people in the media that had hype for him and said he had one of the best hit tools that can't fail are starting to change their minds and are starting to get on the hype train against Jared Kelenic. And it really feels like we're on the verge of a potential, bust-worthy player. And I don't want to overreact to this, but I mean, like, it feels like Scott Service is really having a tough time trying to find a spot for him because he doesn't want to have to play Winker defensively and left, but he wants to get more offense, and Kelenic just hasn't been doing it. So he tries to put someone in a DH, which forces Winker out into left. And it's just, all in all, it combines and turns into a bad situation defensively and left. And then the DH, which hasn't even really worked out, is what it is. And then, I mean, you start thinking about, like, Julio will hopefully turn things around. You're gonna get Kyle Lewis back. You have guys in AAA like Souza and Hamilton and whatnot. And it's like, at what point? I mean, 4 games is too early, but like, at what point do you send him back down again? Do you cut ties with him and trade him or get rid of him? It's a tough situation for the whole management of the franchise because he just hasn't been. I mean, he's shown spurts, but he's never really had a consistent spurt for more than a few games. Like, he hasn't shown like a streak ever really in his career that has given you that hope. And so far this season, it's just been kind of disappointing. I don't know if you have any thoughts on the whole Kelenic situation right now.
I think it's too early to say anything for me yet. He's looked on some pitches, he's looked off of them. He's making a little bit of contact here and there, but I think ask me that question again 2 weeks into the season.
Yeah, to be clear, I'm rooting for all these guys to turn it around because I really do like pretty much all these guys. None of them are like bad guys or players that I have something against or and whatever. But it's hard to be patient when it's like another year and it feels like it's going to be the same problems that we have every other year. And obviously, everyone knows the Mariners have the longest playoff drought and currently among all four major sports. They have not made playoffs in the entirety of my existence. So it's pretty rough, but it's very early. The Twins have a good offense. Their pitching's not great, but I think maybe I don't know. I just really hope the offense turns it around. And speaking of which, a quick preview of the upcoming series. So for a home opener on Friday, which I'll be at, by the way, which is Marco Gonzalez against the Astros. So I am kind of trembling in fear right now for that one. It is a 3-game series against the White Sox. And what do the White Sox know how to do? They know how to hit because they have an elite lineup. So they have Yasmani Grandal, who's got great power and is one of the best on base players in the MLB, not just catchers. Jose Abreu, 2020 MVP, who raked last year. They have Tim Anderson. They signed Josh Harrison to be their second baseman. They don't have Yohan Moncada right now, but they have AJ Pollock. But he actually just this Sunday was his last day. He's actually going on the paternity list, I believe. So I don't think we'll see Pollock, which is a benefit, but they still have Robert and they still have Andrew Vaughn and they still have Eloy Jimenez. The one thing that the Mariners do have going is that the White Sox back end of their rotation, as well as the depth due to injuries, is currently in their favor. So right now they have Giolito and Lance Lynn on the injured list, and they are currently not lined up to face Dylan Cease. So in tomorrow's game at 1:10, Matt Brash makes his debut, which could be a tough outing against a good offense, but they face Vince Velasquez, who was very bad last year. And then in the next game, they face Dallas Keuchel, who was also bad last year and doesn't strike guys out, and they have Robbie Ray on the mound. And then the game after that, it was lined up to be Lucas Giolito against Logan Gilbert, but Giolito is on the injured list, so we don't know who's going to be making that start yet, but it's not going to be Giolito. So presumably 3 pitchers that are either undetermined, like in terms of what they can do and who they are at the MLB level, and also, 2 guys that were really, really not good at all last year. So it's favorable matchup for the offense to get things on track, but also a not favorable matchup for the pitching, which is why it's good that we're lining up our 1 and 2 in the second and third matchups of this. So I think the game plan for tomorrow has to be rake early and often off of Velasquez because you don't know what you're going to get out of Brash and how long he can pitch. But we do have guys like Steckenrider and Seawald ready because they haven't pitched in a while. Same with Castillo. And then the next 2 games, you can rely a little bit more on pitching with Ray and Gilbert, but still 2 pitchers presumably that are not going to be great. So this is a series where we really need to find our offense because if we don't, then you really put your pitching at stake here because of the strength of the White Sox offense.
So I think we match up really nicely against the White Sox. I think our pitching will be fine. Guys like Grandal, who hasn't really gotten on base or hit for power yet this year. He's only 2 games in, but his numbers aren't looking great. And then Tim Anderson's just coming back, so that'll be rough. And then Robert, and Jose Abreu are scary. Andrew Vaughn's kind of scary, but I think we'll be able to survive against their offense.
Yeah.
However, on the side, we'll face their worst pitchers pretty much, but also not offense. Eloy Jimenez, I swear, internet connection. Okay. Eloy Jimenez, I swear, is one of the worst fielders in left field
True.
that I've ever seen. Luis Robert is solid, but he's actually not as good as he seems. Jose Abreu is really nice with the glove, so is Grandal. But then Josh Harrison is like an okay fielder. Tim Anderson's okay. The right fielder, I don't know who that will
Will
be.
presumably be Andrew Vaughn, or maybe it could be Jake Berger or Gavin Sheets. I don't know.
Someone's got to play third though.
Yeah, so
So
one of those guys.
because
Overall, I
they don't
get
have
your
that
point
great of a
though.
defense. And if you think about it, we just played a Twins team that's actually really nice defensively.
Yeah. Well, we had a lot of robberies.
Aaron Buxton really good at defense.
I'll tell you what. I'll tell you what. We did have a lot of bad at bats, but there are a lot of advanced statistics that would say that we were unlucky in a lot of at bats. For instance, like Eugenio Suarez hit a ball where it would have been out in 29 other parks, or Haniger had that ball today where Larnack makes the diving catch on a sinker into left field, or like every single ball that was either hit short into center field or deep into the center field gaps, Byron Buxton ran down and made it look unbelievably easy because he's like the fastest guy in the MLB and also has some of the best reaction in the MLB and is one of the best fielders in the MLB. So literally getting a ball past him in center field anywhere is almost impossible unless you hit it literally out of the stadium. So
and even then, you better hit it a big distance out because he'll rob you.
Exactly. And I mean, when you compare that to the White Sox outfield, Eloy Jimenez is not running anything down in left field, and in right field, it's kind of same situation. So then in center field, it's like Robert's good, but he's not nearly as good as Buxton defensively. He's not nearly as fast, even though he is fast, but he's not nearly as fast as Buxton. And you add to that he has to increase his range because of the deficiencies in right and left field defensively. And all of a sudden, you can start hitting the ball into the outfield and seeing the ball actually fall. The Twins had 3 errors today, but a lot of that was kind of, it didn't really even make a difference because the rest of the defense was good. And they made so many like I swear, Correa made so many diving plays. They had so many highlight reel plays in that series. And Buxton, I mean, they would have been highlight reel plays for another center fielder, but they looked routine to him. So honestly, I mean, it will be a relief to hopefully get a little bit luckier with our contact in this series, considering we have really, really bad pitching to face and a much decreased level of skill defensively from this team. So that's definitely a good matchup there. Do you think that our offense will get it going against this bad pitching?
I'm gonna predict it now. We're gonna score at least 5 runs tomorrow.
5 runs off Vince Velasquez is not a hot take necessarily, but I mean, I thought we were going to do good off of Dylan Bundy, but we'll have to see. I think the offense.
How many times did the Mariners score 5 runs last year? Like 3?
Not very many.
Exactly. This is
I'm saying in general, 5 runs off of Vince Velasquez shouldn't be a hot take, but the fact that it is for our offense is a bad sign. So
yes.
I don't know. I think it's fine. We're obviously also better against right-handed pitching because we have a lot of guys that are lefties, primarily like Kelenic and Winker, and like those two cannot hit left-handed pitching. And
hey man, Winker was like 1.5 feet away from going yard on a lefty today.
But he didn't.
Dude, that thing was smoked and just barely foul.
I don't know, but overall, I think this could be a good series. The White Sox, like last year, we had 2 series against, and we went 4-6. We won both series, both at home and away. We also faced them in our second series of the season last year, and like I said, we won 2 out of 3. So I think it's definitely possible. And I think the Mariners have a good team. It's just about whether the offense can turn it around and whether the pitching can be a little bit more consistent. I also think the pitchers will be able to go deeper. For instance, Gilbert only got up around 85 pitches and they pulled him because they didn't want to overuse him in his first start. And I think he could definitely go deeper in his second start. And hopefully he'll actually use all his pitches throughout the whole start. Maybe Ray gets his strikeout stuff going again and is more aggressive in the strike zone, doesn't walk as many guys. That will severely help him. And it'll be interesting to see what happens with Matt Brash, but it's probably a good thing that most of our better relievers are going to be fresh tomorrow, because we'll see what happens there. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. The Mariners play 1:10 tomorrow, 4:10 on Wednesday, and then 11:10 a morning game on Thursday before we set it up at home versus the Astros. We will be doing these kind of episodes, which we intend to make shorter. This one was a 4-game series and kind of the first impressions of the season, so it was a little bit longer. Should be shorter in the future.
It's a rant episode.
It is a little bit of a rant episode. We hope we're not going to have to cover the catcher position for like 15 minutes next time in our next episode. So we hope to do this after every series if possible, or it could be the next day after a series. Sometimes if we're short of time, we might bunch it into 2 series for an episode, but that's obviously not the goal, because then this kind of length of episode will turn out. But so 2-2 to start the season. It's going to be a tough season for the Mariners in terms of schedule. Obviously, one of the stronger divisions in the NL is coming in for our schedule, and an improved AL. So we'll see how it goes. Hopefully the offense turns it around. And so good episode there. We recap the Twins series. As always, make sure you follow us on Instagram, Mariners Deep Dive Podcast, Twitter, M's Deep Dive Pod, and, follow Facebook if you want. I don't know. That's kind of for the older people there, but whatever.
Link the football podcast.
And also make sure you watch the Football Deep Dive Podcast. Our next couple of episodes are going to be coming out very shortly, where we'll be recapping every single team's free agency and grading them and going over how that goes, so that we can kind of scape it out. And the NFL draft is not far away, so
I'll take the blame on that one for being slow.
We kind of wanted to wait until we got to see the majority of the free agent moves so that we could create more accurate grades. There's still a couple of
I have a document I'm creating for that, and it is about
very large.
It's going to be about 30 pages,
or
more, and I'm not even halfway through. And I'm also working on a lot of projects for college, because I'm at the end of my year where everything is coming down to the wire. So if you do listen to that one and you want to listen to that one, be aware that the next few episodes will not might be a little bit slower, because I'm making time for this podcast, because it's a little bit shorter, easier to come up with right now, and just got a lot going on. But go check that out, because there's plenty of content up right now, and the content that's coming out will be fire.
All good stuff. Great content coming up. A lot going on in that world, a lot going on in this world. And so, make sure that you subscribe if you like this. Subscribe to the YouTube, like the YouTube, comment on the YouTube, subscribe to the podcast, and, share it with your friends, share it with your dog, share it with your grandma, share it with your newborn baby. So let's wrap this one up. Great episode there, taking on the White Sox. We hope to see you after that series, and hopefully by then the Mariners will be 5-2. So for this episode number 12, for Jacob and Luke Westfall, thanks for listening. And as always, peace out, Mariners fans.